I rolled up the driveway of my parents' three-story Victorian, the engine of my beat-up Toyota Corolla coughing like it knew it didn't belong. Inside, crystal chandeliers glittered. Cars worth six figures gleamed, and somewhere behind those tall windows my family was sharpening their usual Sunday insults. They didn't know tonight was the prologue to the sweetest revenge story they'd ever choke on. The house looked like a page ripped from a historic home magazine. Wrap-around porch, ivy-wrapped columns, and the kind of manicured lawn that screams old money, even if the mortgage says otherwise. I parked between Charles's midnight blue Porsche and Mom's pearl white Range Rover. Their side mirrors glinted at my faded paint like they were laughing. My phone buzzed a calendar alert. Dinner, 6 p.m. sharp. Smile politely. Don't punch anyone. I tucked it away, smoothed the thrift store blazer that hid custom tailoring, and reminded myself why I still played poor. Listening to people when they think you're beneath them is a masterclass in character. The front door swung open before I could knock. Dad. Thomas Monroe, silver hair perfectly parted, golf sweater draped over his shoulders, arched one eyebrow. Cutting it close, aren't we, Avery? He gave that half grin people reserve for waiters who refill water too slowly. Traffic, I said, stepping inside. The foyer smelled like lemon polish and expensive insecurities. Mom, Elaine Monroe, pearls tight around her throat, swept in for an air kiss. Sweetheart, you look cozy. Her gaze traveled down the blazer to my scuffed flats, cataloging every dollar I didn't spend. Cozy, right. If she knew each seam in this jacket was hand-stitched in Milan, she'd sprain her jaw. Charles leaned against the banister, twisting his Rolex so the gold face caught the light. 35 investment banker, living proof that arrogance can get tenure. Sis, that car of yours still kickin'? Didn't know Toyotas could survive this long. It gets me from A to B, I said, shrugging. And sometimes C if there's a tow truck, he laughed. Melanie, his wife, professional side smile generator, giggled like it was the first joke she'd ever heard. Mom's heels clicked toward the dining room. Let's sit. The roast will dry out. I took my usual chair, the one with the wobbly back leg. Dad claimed he'd fix it next weekend 3 years ago. I suspected he liked the symbolism. Every time it threatened to buckle, I remembered exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. Crystal goblets chimed as Mom poured a Pinot that cost more than my old laptop. Charles closed another round of funding this week, she announced. $80 million for the firm. Dad beamed. That's my boy, Melanie. You must be proud. I sipped water. The glass was heavy, lead crystal, of course. Everything here was heavy, even the silence between brags. So, Avery, Dad began, turning to me with an encouraging smile polished thin. Still freelancing. I have a friend looking for an IT assistant. Small team, entry level, but it's steady. He said steady like lifeline. I folded my napkin over my lap. I'll think about it. Melanie tapped her phone. Entry level could be good. Stability, benefits, maybe you could upgrade that apartment of yours. Her tone dripped with the kind of concern Instagram influencers fake in sponsored posts. Charles leaned closer. Seriously, sis, there's no shame in pivoting. Not everyone can be a CEO. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. Not everyone hides that she already is. I took a bite of roast, dry, but I didn't dare ask for gravy. Asking signaled need. Mom passed me the salad tongs anyway. You're 31 now, honey. We just want you to thrive. By thrive, Dad added, we mean stop pouring time into a hobby that's not paying off. He dabbed his lips like he hadn't just filleted my life. I counted the chandelier crystals to keep my expression neutral, 1 crystal per minute until the news hit. There were 37. Perfect. Charles raised his glass. To knowing when to quit. I clinked mine without spilling a drop. To timing, I replied, letting the word hang. They dove back into self-congratulation. New clients for Charles, a spa partnership for Melanie, Mom's gala committee, Dad's golf handicap. Each bullet point aimed to bounce off my allegedly empty bank account. Between stories, Dad served advice. Liquidate whatever little shares you're clinging to before the market tanks again. Cash on hand matters. Mom sighed as if the universe put her on Earth to worry. Your trust fund would still be intact if you'd listened. I smiled gently. I listened. I just chose to do something different with it. Charles barked a laugh. Oh, yeah. How's that app you pitched us Thanksgiving of 19? What was it, mood-based grocery lists? He mimed typing on a phone, then flopped over dramatically. Melanie patted his arm. Be nice. It's fine, I said. Mocking keeps him young. Dad slapped the table lightly. Charlie, enough. Then to me, softer. Avery, success is measured by results. At some point, dreams expire. I nodded as if the statement was profound. 24 minutes left on my mental timer. Dessert arrived early, Mom's meringue pie crowned with toasted peaks. The smell of sugar filled the space between us, but no one offered me a slice. They were too busy praising Mom for outdoing herself again. I didn't mind. Let them feast. Hunger sharpens. Charles poured champagne. A toast. May next year bring Avery clarity. Laughter scattered like glass beads. I lifted my water. And may next year reveal what really matters. My voice stayed level, but the wobbly chair squeaked. For a second, I thought it might give in front of everyone. Then it righted itself. Stubborn, like me. Mom tilted her head. What does matter to you, sweetheart? Exactly what I'm learning right now, I answered. She blinked, confused. But before she could probe, the living room TV flickered louder. Dad must have bumped the remote. CNBC's logo filled the screen. A breaking news banner blazed red. Anchors spoke hurriedly, but the words blurred behind glass doors. Dad reached for the volume. Probably another crypto crash, he muttered, half rising. I glanced at my watch. 17 minutes. Perfect pacing. I set my water down with care. The stemware rang like a starting bell. And for the first time all evening, I let myself grin. The wobbly chair could collapse now. I wouldn't be sitting much longer. The meringue pie was halfway gone, the champagne half flat, and somehow I was still the punchline at my own family's dinner. I just think, Dad was saying, swirling his wine like a TED Talk was about to break out. It's time you stopped being so idealistic, Avery. There's no shame in accepting help. Help. That word again. From this family, help meant, we don't believe in you, but we'll rescue your pride just enough that you remember who's in charge. I appreciate the concern, I said, folding my napkin, but I'm good. Mom leaned forward like she was about to confess something heartfelt. Sweetheart, we know you're proud, but pride doesn't pay rent. Actually, it had paid for 5 properties, all in cash. But sure. Go off. Charles refilled his glass. You know what it is? She's afraid to admit she failed. Like if she just waits long enough, that app of hers will suddenly turn into Uber. It's called Veritas, I said evenly. Not that they heard me. Melanie chimed in with a voice like a soft slap. Even if it doesn't work out, Avery, we still love you. You'll always have a room here. A room? In a house where the chair I was sitting on hadn't been fixed in 3 years. I kept my voice light. Thanks, but I don't plan on moving back in. Dad chuckled like that was a punchline. Planning is good, but planning doesn't mean you're above reality. Mom added, or above good advice. And there it was, the moment that always landed like a slap you pretend was a pat on the back. That subtle shift where concern turns into superiority, where love gets coded in condescension. You ever had that moment when someone smiles at you while stomping on your backbone? Because if you've ever been the disappointment in your own family, you already know that smile. If you've ever been in that exact chair, just nod or comment, I've sat there too. I promise you're not alone. Charles smirked. I'm just saying, it wouldn't kill you to take a consulting gig, Ava. Even Dad's buddy at Kirkland offered to pass your resume. Oh, the IT help desk job, I said. He blinked. It's a start. I tilted my head. Funny how my start is a fallback to you, but your first unpaid internship at Morgan Stanley was a sign of genius. Silence. For a whole beat. Melanie coughed. I shouldn't have said that, maybe. But then again, why not? Mom exhaled slowly. We don't need tension. We're family. Yeah, the kind that keeps receipts and forgets birthdays. Let's just enjoy dinner, Dad said, stabbing a green bean like it had personally offended him. My fork hovered over my plate. 15 minutes left. Just 15 more minutes of this circus before the ringmaster, the truth, would take the mic. Charles nudged his phone toward me across the table. On it was a link. Open this, it's a coding boot camp, real back-end stuff. Maybe you could finally build something functional. I looked at the screen. Funny, I thought. He doesn't even realize I own the startup that built the back end for 3 apps in his own financial portfolio. I'll consider it, I said, with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Melanie perked up. That's good, right? See, Charles? She's being open-minded. Open-minded? Or just practiced? I'd become fluent in swallowing insults and calling it patience. Dad raised his glass. To progress, even if it's slow. My water clinked against it. To clarity and timing. When Mom brought out dessert plates, I excused myself and walked briefly to the hallway, mostly to breathe. I leaned against the banister, staring at the family portrait on the wall. Me, Charles, and a much younger version of our parents. I looked small in that frame, tucked between ambition and expectation, trying not to take up space. Well, I was done with that. I wasn't going to fight their narrative tonight. I wasn't going to convince them of anything. I didn't need to. The truth was already booked to arrive, on schedule, on national television in 12 minutes. When I returned to the table, Charles was bragging about a dinner with a tech VC. Melanie was gushing about her skincare launch. Dad was doing his thing, predicting recession cycles like he'd invented economics. They didn't even look up. That's what stung most. Not the words, not even the jokes, just the disinterest. The refusal to imagine that maybe the one they always pitied had quietly passed them all. Mom caught me watching and smiled. You're thinking about dessert, aren't you? Not exactly, I said. Just thinking about what happens when people finally stop pretending. Her brow furrowed. What do you mean? But before I could answer, the living room TV lit up again. Dad muttered, "Stupid remote," and reached to lower the volume. Too late. CNBC's anchor filled the screen. A red banner crawled across the bottom. Breaking. Megatech acquires AI startup Veritas for $2.1 billion. Founder Avery Monroe confirmed. Silence didn't fall. It shattered. The kind of silence that makes even the air sit still. And in that perfect, frozen second, I didn't say anything. I just looked around the table, really looked. Every single one of them caught in a moment that would burn into memory like fire. And my chair? It wobbled beneath me, but I didn't. I was done being the one who had to keep balance for their comfort. Let it shake. I was about to stand anyway. The CNBC anchor's voice kept rolling, but I didn't move. Not yet. Across the table, my mom still held a dessert fork in midair, her hand frozen like someone had pressed pause. Charles blinked like the ticker tape had personally insulted him. Melanie's jaw had slackened into an open O, the kind normally reserved for red carpet disasters. Dad's hand was still reaching for the remote, but he'd stopped halfway. Like if he didn't finish the motion, maybe the news wouldn't be real. The only thing still in motion was the flickering blue glow from the TV and the soft creak of my old chair. I sat still. Let it land. Let them feel it. For 6 years, I'd built this moment. Brick by brick, line of code by line of code, behind the same quiet face they all dismissed. And now they were meeting the version of me that had never needed their validation in the first place. But I wasn't going to start with, "I told you so." That's what they expected. So instead, I said nothing. I reached calmly for my water, took a sip, and set it down like I hadn't just detonated a $2.1 billion grenade in the middle of dinner. It was Dad who finally broke the silence. Is that your company?" The anchor repeated. "Veritas, founded by tech entrepreneur Avery Monroe, was acquired earlier today by Megatech in an all-cash deal valued at $2.1 billion. Monroe retained full ownership prior to the deal. I raised my eyebrows like the news was as surprising to me as it was to them. Guess they pronounced it right this time. Charles stared at me like I'd grown antlers. But you're not... How is that even... I tilted my head. Still think I should apply for that help desk position? Nobody laughed. Melanie blinked fast. So wait, you're the founder? Veritas is my company, I said. It always was. But you live in a studio apartment, Mom said quietly, almost accusingly. I smiled. I own the building and the one across the street. Her eyes darted like she was searching for a reason, any reason to make it not true. But that car is 13 years old, gets great mileage, I said. But I can have the Bentley brought around if it makes this easier. Dad's face flushed red. Why didn't you say anything? I let the question hang, because this wasn't just about money. It was about what they valued and what they didn't. They respected Charles because he looked the part. He had the shoes, the car, the wine vocabulary. But none of them had ever asked if I was okay. Not once. Not really. They didn't see me, so I stopped showing them. I pushed back from the table and stood up. My knees didn't shake this time. There's something else, I said. I opened my laptop, the one I never brought to family dinners, not the decoy they'd seen before. The real one. Maria, my assistant, was already on video call. Ready when you are, Ms. Monroe? Go ahead, I told her. Behind me, the TV changed. Maria had taken remote access and broadcasted the screen onto the living room's massive smart TV. A new set of documents filled the screen. I looked at my parents. I asked my team to run a private audit, I said. Just for context. Some of these numbers might look familiar. Mom stepped forward. What is this? Everything, I said. Your investment history, property holdings, credit lines, assets, debt, all cross-verified. Dad stiffened. You had no right. I had every right, I cut in. You lectured me about risk, about wasting the trust fund. You mocked every decision I made, and all that time you were juggling debt to keep up appearances. Maria flipped slides like an accountant peeling layers off a lie. Charles's fake investment portfolio, Melanie's business running in the red, Mom and Dad's credit card limits maxed out, a second mortgage they'd hidden. The numbers didn't lie, but they always had. I didn't show you success because I wanted to see how you'd treat me when I had nothing to offer you, I said. Turns out I didn't have to wait long. Charles stood, stammering. You think this is revenge? No, I said. This is reality. He looked at Melanie. She just made us look like fools. You did that yourselves, I said. You want to know the weirdest part? I didn't even feel angry. Not anymore. There was no satisfaction in watching them squirm, just clarity. I wasn't proving anything. I was reclaiming something they never gave me. Respect. Mom's voice cracked. We were trying to help. You were trying to control, I replied, to fit me into a version of success that made you feel comfortable. Fancy titles, luxury brands, inflated worth. Dad looked older than I remembered, smaller. Then what is success to you, Avery? He asked. Genuinely for once. I met his eyes. Success is doing it anyway, even when no one claps for you, especially when they don't. And then I turned to Maria. Go ahead and close it out. I think they've seen enough. I didn't need to stay. I didn't need dessert. I didn't need to explain. But as I walked toward the door, I paused. Just so you know, I said over my shoulder, the trust fund I wasted on that app, I invested it in Amazon and Tesla in 2016. That alone's worth about $8 million now. Silence again. But this time I owned it. I walked outside, past the Corolla, past the neighbors peeking through blinds, past the weight of 6 years of pretending. The wind was cool. The sky was clear. And for the first time in a long time, so was I. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the anchor on CNBC continuing his report like he hadn't just flipped my family's world upside down. Sources confirm Monroe retained full ownership prior to acquisition. Analysts are calling this one of the boldest solo exits in tech history. Charles finally blinked. That's got to be a mistake. Melanie looked at me like I was a stranger who'd broken into her sister-in-law's body. You built that company?" "I did," I said simply, "in a dorm room, on borrowed internet, with a cracked screen and a second-hand laptop." Dad's voice sliced through. "You mean the trust fund?" I turned to him, calm. "Yes, the one you said I wasted." Mom sat down, slowly, like her knees had given up. "But you never told us. You never said a word." "Would it have mattered?" I asked. "The last time I tried to explain something I was building, you offered me a job, resetting routers." Silence. It wasn't rage I felt. It wasn't triumph either. It was stillness, the kind that comes when the weight finally shifts off your chest. I opened my laptop. "I'd like to show you something," I said. "Maria, go ahead." The screen behind me flickered. TV off, HDMI feed on. My assistant's voice came through crisp and confident. "Displaying Monroe Family Audit Report prepared as requested." A new slide filled the room. Organized, color-coded, brutal. Mom's gasp was audible. "What is this?" "The numbers," I said. "Your numbers. Not to embarrass you, just to clarify the picture. Slide 1. Second mortgage taken out on the house 3 years ago. Maxed credit cards. HELOC drawn down to 92%. Dad's face went pale. Slide 2. Charles's financials. Over-leveraged margin accounts. Fabricated portfolio values." He stiffened. "That's private." "It's true," I said. Slide 3. Melanie's skincare startup. Burn rate unsustainable. No investors in over a year. She turned scarlet. "You looked into my business?" "I own the platform your site's hosted on," I replied. A full beat of stunned silence. Then Mom whispered, "Why?" "Because for years," I said, "I let you think I was the weak one, the burden, the disappointment, and I needed to know if that image was rooted in reality or in your need to feel superior." Dad finally found his voice. It cracked. "So you humiliated us? On purpose?" I shook my head. "No, I didn't humiliate you. I gave you the rope. You tied the knot." Charles stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," I said, and meant it. I always was. The room pulsed with shock, anger, disbelief, none of it mine. I was done absorbing that energy. I stepped forward. "I'm not here to collect apologies. I'm not here to gloat." I took a breath. "I'm here to make you a choice." They all stared like I'd lost my mind. "Veritas is expanding fast," I said. "Rapidly. We're launching 4 divisions. We need people, honest people, people who are willing to start at the bottom." "You want us to work for you?" Charles said, his voice thick with disdain. "I want you to earn something for once," I replied. "Not a title, not an image. Real contribution, entry level, transparent pay, training included." Melanie scoffed. "I'm not taking orders from my sister-in-law." "You don't have to," I said. "You can walk away, but you should know. The people I used to look up to, they're now calling me for advice. And they're not laughing." Mom was trembling now, hands clutched around her napkin. "Avery, honey, this is a lot." "It's not," I said. "It's what it always was. You just didn't see it. Or maybe didn't want to. The sad truth is, people don't actually want you to succeed. They want you to stay where they can understand you, where you're not a threat, where they feel bigger. And when you quietly outgrow that space, they act like you broke something." I set the offer letters down on the table, neatly labeled folders. 36 hours, I said. Talk it over, but don't come back asking for a corner office. You'll start where I started. Dad didn't look at me. Mom's eyes were glassy. Charles looked like he might throw up. Melanie stood frozen, holding her phone like it might save her. Maria's voice returned, steady. "Ms. Monroe, your ride is waiting. Press briefing starts in 21 minutes. I nodded, closed my laptop, walked to the door. But just as I reached the foyer, Mom called out, "All those Sundays, all those dinners. Why didn't you ever fight back?" I paused, then turned gently. Because I was busy building something real. While you were all trying so hard to look successful, I was learning how to be it. I left the house without another word, not in anger, not in haste, but in peace. And that's when I knew. The real revenge wasn't the money. It wasn't the headlines. It wasn't even the power. It was no longer needing their approval to feel whole. The ride from my parents' house to the Veritas press event took 15 minutes. It felt shorter, or maybe the air just felt lighter now that I wasn't dragging their expectations behind me like a dead weight. I sat in the back of the black Bentley, real leather, real ownership, not least for optics, watching the trees blur past the window. My reflection stared back, calm, not smug, just calm. 6 years of holding my breath. Now I could finally exhale. When we pulled up outside the hotel ballroom, reporters were already swarming. Bright lights, microphones, flashbulbs. But none of it rattled me. I'd already faced the harshest critics I'd ever know. My own family. Everything else? Easy. Maria met me at the side entrance. "Press is ready. You'll speak after Megatech's CEO. "Good," I said, adjusting my jacket. "Let's remind them who built the engine they just bought." Inside, a banner stretched across the stage. "Megatech acquires Veritas. The future of AI starts here." I waited backstage as the CEO gave the usual speech. Synergy, growth, innovation. The words meant nothing. The room wasn't here for him. Not really. They were waiting for me. When he finally gestured toward the curtain and said, "And now, the visionary behind it all, Avery Monroe." I stepped forward without hesitation. The applause was loud, but it didn't move me. What moved me was the front row, because they were there. My parents, Charles, Melanie. I didn't invite them. But they came, not out of pride, out of curiosity, out of the kind of discomfort people feel when the narrative they wrote gets rewritten in real time. I took the podium and looked straight ahead, not at the cameras, not at the lights, at them. Then I smiled, just a little. When I started Veritas, I didn't know where it would go. I just knew what I wanted it to be, something real, not loud, not showy, just powerful, quietly. The room went still. You see, I spent a long time being underestimated, people assuming I didn't belong because I didn't play the part, I didn't dress the part, I didn't look successful. A pause, not for effect, for breath. But success isn't loud. It's not about cars or watches or country clubs. It's about building something that matters, especially when no one's watching. There was a moment of silence, a clean, open space where people were listening, not just hearing. I ended with this. The truth is, I'm not here because I was supported. I'm here because I learned to keep going without applause. The room stood to clap, but again, that wasn't the part that mattered. What mattered was my mom dabbing her eyes with a tissue. What mattered was Charles, for the first time, not reaching for his phone mid-sentence. What mattered was the way none of them could look me in the eye too long, because for the first time ever, they were seeing me. After the event, I walked off stage. Maria handed me a cold bottle of water. "Your parents are waiting near the elevator," she said quietly. "Want me to block them?" I thought about it, then shook my head. Let them wait. I left through the service entrance. No speech, no goodbye, no need. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. Let the facts speak. Let the numbers talk. Let your actions echo. And let the silence teach the lesson they refused to learn when you spoke. The next morning, Maria knocked softly on my office door. "They've all signed," she said. I looked up from the stack of interview requests on my desk. "All of them?" She nodded. "Charles, Melanie, even your parents. They sent back the paperwork for the entry-level onboarding, no edits." I leaned back in my chair, letting that sink in. They signed. They chose the hard way, the honest way. Part of me expected them to reject it out of pride, to ignore the offer and continue pretending, but they didn't. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was desperation, or maybe, for once, It was humility. Later that afternoon, I walked through the Veritas offices, floor-to-ceiling glass, sleek, clean, efficient, every room humming with quiet focus. I stopped outside one of the orientation rooms. Inside, I saw them. My father sitting stiffly at a training desk, a notepad in front of him. Charles, wearing a polo instead of a blazer, eyes fixed on the presentation. Melanie tapping nervously at her pen, hair pulled back tight like she was trying to hold her confidence together. And my mother, taking notes, real notes. I stood there for a moment, watching. Not from spite, not to gloat, just to remind myself, this was real. At lunch, I sat alone on the rooftop terrace. Maria joined me a few minutes later. "You really think they'll last?" she asked, slicing into her salad. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe they will. Maybe they'll quit in a week." She tilted her head. "And if they do?" "Then they weren't ready to rebuild," I said. But I was ready to offer it. That's the thing they never taught me growing up. Forgiveness doesn't always mean trust. Sometimes it just means you're done carrying it. That evening, I got a text from Mom. "Thank you for the opportunity. I didn't know how little I knew. I'm sorry it took this long to see you." I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left to prove. 2 weeks later, I walked into the Monday strategy meeting. Charles was already there, early for once, reviewing documentation. He looked up and gave a small, respectful nod. Not smug, not performative, just a man in a room, learning something. And Melanie? She'd submitted a suggestion to improve the customer onboarding flow. It wasn't bad. I approved it. My parents mostly kept quiet. They followed instructions. They showed up. And slowly, I could feel the shift, not in them, but in me. I no longer needed them to say I was enough, because I'd already built something that proved it. Being underestimated isn't always a curse. Sometimes it's the cleanest fuel you'll ever burn. But eventually, even that fire settles, and what's left is clarity, peace, and, if you're lucky, a few people who finally get it. And maybe that's what growing up really is. Not becoming who they wanted you to be, but choosing who you'll allow back in, and on what terms. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had someone count you out, only to come back when they saw what you built? Drop a "they'll see one day" in the comments if you've ever been on the silent end of someone's doubt. You never know who needs to see they're not alone.